Peace and blessings. Darren, what's up?
Chilling, man. Happy Sunday. It's a little weird to be up top, in one of these.
Oh, the reverses, yeah. It's a good flip. It's a good flip. I appreciate it.
The first shall become the last. The top shall become the bottom.
Just always gotta change it up. How's everyone doing today?
Let me drop in this comment so people know what we're about to be talking about today.
Yes, sir. You want to kick it off?
Indeed. So today's topics, first off, I said it before you hopped on, but I'll say it again. Welcome back. We got another session of You Think. This is our weekly way of just sort of, in addition to the episodes of You Free that we're dropping every Wednesday, get together, chop it up in front of the community / with the community. So it's always an open invitation if anyone wants to hop on one of these as well. Just about, things that have been on our mind over the past week, things that we're thinking about. So with that in mind, this week's session, we're going to hit a few different topics, including the versus battle that was this week of Jeezy versus Gucci. We're going to talk a little about student loans, do our usual Sunday shout-outs. But unfortunately, we got to start off on a more somber note, a more tragic note, by remembering one of the members of the You Free family, Yeab, who hopped on a session with myself and another member of the You Free community, Andrew, aka Dwight, many know him as Dwight. Not too long ago, unfortunately, this week we heard the news that Yeab has left Earth at the age of 25, which was really painful news for a lot of people to a lot of different degrees. So I can just say, from my experience, Yeab was a year below me at Columbia, but I didn't really get to know him until after Columbia, where I met him really through Andrew. I've mentioned it to you before, Eric, but Yeab was one of those people where I feel like everyone remembers the first time that they met him just because his energy was just so in the first few minutes of meeting him, right? So in my case, I think the first time I really had a genuine interaction with him and thus sticks out as the first time I met him was right after 444, the Jay-Z album dropped. And I pulled up to Andrew's apartment at the time, and Yeab was there, and we chopped it up, and sort of the first
album just came out, so yeah, you guys definitely talking about
that. Exactly. We were celebrating the album. We debated a little bit about whether "Bam," the song with Damian Marley, constituted a banger or not. What's the definition of a banger? Did he have any bangers on the album? But what I would say is I think even in that first interaction, I was able to sort of see some qualities of Yeab that really everyone was able to see as soon as they met him, which was a super smart dude and could debate or could just break down any topic. When I say we were talking about whether this was a banger, this was we were getting into it.
It's one of those discussions.
It was one of those discussions, and with Yeab, those discussions were really effortless. He was also really, really talented at being the right one in the conversation without making you feel dumb or without, always, the discussion was always productive as opposed to a debate, right? He was always just well, this is how I think about it. And you're you know what, you think about it right. I wasn't thinking about it that way. And that extended to a lot of topics beyond just, music to, a lot of different things that was the case for.
Yeah, no,
one of the funniest dudes.
I met him for 2 or 3 times, just out in New York City. I think Dwight was DJing at Cafe Azuli. And I think that was after the time he came on the session, and we were chopping up about it in the middle of a party, talking about You Free and the conversation that he was having with you guys, and just sort of how he wants to get on another episode, and just how he just fucks the vision. But it's purely positive energy from him. So
one of the funniest dudes who I've met as well, which is another way of you could get super serious 1 second and then he'd be the one who knew you a joke to diffuse it and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, my sort of takeaway, I guess, like as I sit from my vantage point as someone who, you know, knew him and have a lot of fond memories with him, but also wasn't necessarily interacting with him on a day-to-day basis, like some people within my community or within the U-Free community and U-Free family were. Um, for me, it's like, I think as you grow older, I'm starting to understand a little bit more about like the saying, you know, the good die young. You know, you kind of hear that or I heard that as a kid and I didn't really understand it. I'm like, I'm young, I'm good.
Yeah, we gonna for
But
a
it's
while.
like, yeah, but it's like the qualities that Yeab effortlessly demonstrated are the ones that, you know, on you free episodes we're talking about cultivating in ourselves, and Yeab was always further along in that, you know, like it came effortlessly, like championing his friends and like all of this stuff, like all of that was second nature to him, you know, and it's not always second nature to the rest of us. And I think in that sense, you know, like he was 25 and he accomplished a ton during his life and made a really positive impact. And there was a beautiful service for him yesterday, where a lot of his different, you know, friends and family were sharing the impact that he made. And it was clear that, uh, you know, no one, the journeys that they're all on are going to be forever altered by having met him in ways that further impact the people around them, because they're going to strive to and embody the qualities that he, you know, helped nurture in them, and then that in turn is going to make an impact, you know, down the line. So yeah, I mean, all that to say, you know, rest in peace and rest in power to Yeab. One last thing I'll say is, do I put together a playlist that people are contributing certain songs that they remember, you know, Yeab by and
Where can
or
people
forever
find it?
associate with him. It's on Spotify. I don't know if the link is currently on Dwight's page or not, but I know Dwight is, you know, happy to share it around, or hit me up and I could share it around. Don't, you know, let Dwight grieve and do his thing. But for me, one of the songs that I remember him turning up to was the song by Baka, Not Nice. Do you remember that song? Live Up to My Name. And it's funny because I Googled, his full name is Yebsera, so I Googled his name just to see what it meant. You know, like, I don't know, I'm weird like that. And his name meant work of God. And you know, in the memorial service, someone talked about how, like, they were like, you know, I don't want to ascribe my beliefs in a higher power to anybody else, but for me, having known Yeb was, you know, proof in a sense of divinity, the fact that someone like that existed, right? So I think, you know, the fact that that is a sentiment that he left behind for a lot of people in his short time on Earth shows that, you know, Yeb did live up to his name in that sense. So that's all I got on that. But, you know, rest in peace and power. He'll forever be missed. Like I said, everybody who knew him
Sure.
will be affected by the loss. So a lot of love to everyone who's grieving during that.
Oh, very, very well said. Very well said.
Life. Okay, so on to this week's topics. Damn, I should have flipped it so you went first, because like that. Okay, all right, I'm still going.
It's all good. No, but that was very well said. It was necessary. It definitely was. I mean, there's nothing else for me to add on, which wouldn't seem appropriate based on everything that you've said. So what do you want me to do? You want me to kick it off?
I just needed a second to switch gears mentally.
Mental break, yeah.
But yeah, all right. So this week's topics, you know, onto the hip hop world, which feels appropriate, you know, as a segue. So you know,
the lights are playing in the background right now, but I don't know if YouTube is gonna let this rock down the line, so I'm gonna just I'm gonna leave it alone.
Fair. Yeah. So this week in the hip hop world, or in the culture world, you know, hip hop culture, there was the versus battle. So for those who don't know, I'm sure most of the folks in the U-Free community by now have heard of versus at the very least. But yeah, for those who don't know, started off Timbaland and Swiss Beats. Basically, they just get, you know, two different artists.
Do you remember who the first two artists that faced each other were?
I can't remember. I know Hit Boy was in there super early. Yeah, I'm not sure who the very first. It might have been them. I mean, if they're the ones who started it, maybe it was Timbaland and Swizz Beatz
And
themselves. I'm
Swizz.
not sure.
Oh, I think
But
so,
yeah, so
yeah.
I mean,
I think I
well,
know
it
which
also
one.
go. Yeah, it also goes back to like beat battles back in the day. Like that's like as producers and make like that active facing off has always been a thing. So it makes sense that they're just sort of taking that energy and applying it to different to like the actual artists themselves or
Entirely.
writers or whatever. But anyway, so two artists, play their hits or whatever, go back and forth. You score it, you say who won, etc. No, nobody's really keeping track, right? Like it's usually just like a
Some
celebration.
people probably. I mean, you're keeping track mentally. I don't think someone's like physically writing like, okay, this person had that round, that person had this
Yeah,
one.
exactly right. Like at the end of the day, it's still subjective. Like everyone is keeping track for sure. Like, but at the end of the day, it's still subjective, is what I meant to say. Like, there's
Exactly.
no
Yeah. Yeah.
official win. So yeah, they've had a bunch of these, a bunch of artists have done them, and typically it's like two artists who really respect each other, just sort of trading off, like I remember when you dropped that one, like I was doing this at the time, and
Oh,
stuff like that.
yeah, pit against each other at a time. Yep.
Exactly, yeah. So this week's versus battle was a little different than that. They got Jeezy, formerly Young Jeezy, and Gucci Mane. And for those who don't know that whole history, I'm not the best person to educate on it, but the long story short of it is that, they've had beef with each other for 15, 20 years, to the point where one of Jeezy's associates attempted to murder Gucci, and Gucci killed him in self-defense. So, like, literally lives have been lost over the beef that they have with each other. And this week, Jeezy invited Gucci, is how I understand it, basically to sort of squash the beef by doing this verses and like going back and forth, but like still like doing so with mutual respect. Did you end up watching the battle?
I watched the battle, yeah, and I was going in and out because in order for it to kick off, it was taking on a little bit too long, and I'm like, all right, these DJs are spinning a little bit too much for me. I actually want to see these two in a room and sort of just open up the discussion and just get right to it. It was a good one. I'm more of a. It's interesting because anytime when I think about Jeezy, I think back to Kadeem's episode that we had. And he like reenacted the whole thing with his cookies, but Jeezy had the money in the back. So that's always the first thing I think about now whenever I think about TM101. But no, it was a good battle, and I think that the most powerful thing for me was just seeing people who've had like a long standing like history in which like they weren't agreeing with each other, but they were such good friends at first, and being able to sort of, or at least what it seems like, put their differences aside to even be in the same room. That shows a lot of growth, a
I
lot, and I
agree.
think that. Uh-huh.
Sorry, I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, I agree, but I also, so like basically Gucci played a bunch of Jeezy diss records, right? And like one of them was one where he talks about having murdered Jeezy's associate or friend, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that the full nature of that relationship isn't quite known.
Yep.
And he like put your partner in the dirt, like like he was saying some real disrespectful things on one end, but then on the other hand, it's like that dude tried to kill you, so like
Yeah,
you
exactly.
should be able to
That's
talk your shit.
that was the part that was already that was understood. Where it was just like, all right, like just be happy that I'm here, and I'm willing to put that aside by me even being in here. You know what I mean? Like everything else is kind of said in here. It's like we already. There's nothing extra that we're gonna be able to say now that's gonna be able to hurt feelings or do any more damage. You know what I'm saying? It's like by us already being in the space and me accepting the olive branch, like that already shows that where we're at in life. But no, I feel like yeah, there were points in which like things felt like they were being instigated, but it was like how can you instigate something even more to after that degree?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like Gucci was definitely instigating, and then like when he played that one, Jeezy came back with a speech about basically being like, look, like this isn't about us, it's about King Von, Nipsey Hussle, and just like naming all these artists who died from gun violence, and basically just being like, look, like we need to set the examples. One moment which is really telling to me was that Gucci and him were going back and forth, and Gucci had the mic up, and then Jeezy mentioned like this is about King Von. For those who don't know, King Von is an artist who was shot and killed recently, um, and Gucci put the mic down. Like, he was about to say something, and he was just like, "Yeah, I can't say anything to that." And I think, I don't know. For me, I guess like the takeaway for me is that while I agree and appreciate the fact that, having them there coexisting and they performed together at the end, like all of that was a good stepping stone of showing that reconciliation is possible. I also think it's important that reconciliation happens behind closed doors before you amplify it or make it public. And in this particular case,
in time. That's why I think that there was already that form of reconciliation that already happened slightly behind closed doors. Even if it was 10 minutes before they actually both got on that stage, it was just like that already having that mental agreement. I don't think that was the first time that they were in the same space whatsoever.
yes and no, though, because I do feel like to me it seemed like Gucci was trying to pull some shit over on him by like playing these records, and for me that's where like that undermines the message a little bit. And that's, again, like, I understand entirely why Gucci would feel that way and come from that, because like they tried to, his life was threatened.
That was what I wanted to also vent about the situation in that way too.
Yeah, for sure. But again, for me, it's just like, it's just weird. I guess it's just weird for me that this is all like entertainment. Like that this is playing like that. People who are, including me, right? Like people who never have to deal with life or death situations like this are just sitting at home commenting and like making jokes, and like, if there's a live stream of commentary going on this. For me, it's just like, if that's going to be the case, then before it even goes into that platform, I feel like to me, 10 minutes before whatever happened beforehand that led to that, like, again, like it came out, I think it was a success for what it set out to do, but for me the message was somewhat undermined by this notion of like entertainment first, or this has to happen in the public eye before really happening behind closed doors.
And I definitely see what you're saying completely. I think I'm looking at it in a sense where, because this is still a music battle, it's like I'm gonna just let whatever songs still go off. You know what I mean? It'd be different if this is a sit down conversation and all of a sudden he put out his iPhone and started playing this music during the talk. You know what I mean?
True.
But yeah, it brings a way for it to be like, hey, like this was what was on my mind during the time in which we were really in it. And also, I mean, it shows something where it's just like, if I can also play the stuff that seems like I'm instigating, we're still in the space. It's like you've already heard these songs probably 1,000 times before in your own space with your own people, just thinking probably about like, wow, this individual said this about me. But now to hear it and we're in the space and room, that's a different kind of iron. We really have to put this behind us or aside from us,
Yeah, that's real. That's definitely real. I mean, a lot of ways, I guess, to interpret it and commentate on it.
Yeah, there was
me,
one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say there was this one post that stuck out to me. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. It was like this whole thing. What I learned, it was from MVS Rugs on Instagram. What I learned from Gucci versus Jeezy, it was 4 points. The issues we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. That's the first point. Second point, the past is a great teacher, but it's a terrible landlord. Learn from the past, don't live in it. Point number 3, you're not over something until you're forced with the opportunity to respond the same way, but you respond a different way. And then 4, 2 mountains may not meet, but 2 men will. And they quoted Master P. That second point hits for me a lot. The past is a great teacher, but it's a terrible landlord. Learn from the past, don't live in it. Because I feel like there's even issue like with some of my friends or even family members, and after a while, it's just like, what do we even? They say, what is this even about? At the end of the day, like I don't even remember the way a lot of this shit started off, and even when you do remember how some things start, once you get to a point where you want to forgive, it kind of it takes away part of the journey if you keep living back or going back into that same place, and you also start feeling those similar emotions. You know what I'm saying? Whenever you hark back to like situations, the time in which someone's done you wrong, even though you had 2 completely different places in life.
Well, for me, that then hits on the third point too. I don't know if you have it open. Can you read the third point?
The third point is you're not over something until you're faced with the opportunity to respond the same way, but you respond a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, that's like the key point, and that's where like you could make the argument kind of in two different ways of whether that happened. Because on one hand, it is like obviously they are not responding with violence, so you're responding in a different way. But that's also where like some of the instigation comes, where it's like you sometimes you have the opportunity to just not instigate, but you still choose to instigate. Then clearly, even though you're saying you're over it or that the beef is squashed, it's not really, because you're not switching that mentality. Your mentality is still antagonized. Put this other person down. Be better than this other person. Which again, like, are understandable emotions considering everything that's transpired between the two. But for me, that's where it's like there's a little bit of a disconnect between what they're saying is happening, which is like we're putting this all behind us, the past is the past, etc., versus what's actually playing out on stage, where one person is maybe doing that more. And again, like that one person also wasn't the one who.
Exactly. You know, and this goes like a five-step process. You know what I'm saying? Like there's times in which like I've argued or I haven't been in a great space with someone, and it definitely has been a situation as extreme as this, and it was even hard for me to be in the same room as them. You know what I mean? And that took time. So this could be like the first step or the second step on a 10-step process. You know?
That's real. I mean, hopefully the lessons that people learn from it are the ones that they sought out to teach. And I think for a lot of people it will be, but I do think there's a subsection of people who are going to look at it and be like, yo, Gucci stunned him by playing those diss records, or like, yo, Jeezy's like so much more mature. He's talking about real estate while Gucci's talking about jewelry. You know, like still sort of pitting them against each other.
Those are some of the points I still brought up. Yeah, the real estate versus jewelry. And it's like, all right, people just talk about what they want to talk about if that's what they want to discuss at that time. It's funny how the way people pick off different things or different battles amongst that same battle. Oh, this is battle between old school, like the old guard versus new guard. You know what I mean? Relevancy versus like the classics.
Well, it's just projection, man, and that's like where I that's where the entertainment thing to me gets kind of weird, because it's like this is real life for them, you know, like he actually had to kill somebody so he was not dying. Like that is real life, and people are like making memes, LMAO, like this, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just weird, and like that celebrity culture in general in America, right? A lot of the times it's just like people living real experiences, but because they're in the public eye, that's diluted into them just being a you know, someone on your screen and like projecting and whatever comes with that, you know.
9 times.
So,
you're not wrong about that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I like, but on the same time, it's like having a public platform. Like I'm not opposed to the idea of that. It's just that I think that a lot of times the nature of the relationship between the audience and like the people who are being watched just dilutes a lot of like the reality behind it. And if it didn't dilute the reality, a lot of times it would be more impactful and actually like having a positive influence, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's still room and opportunity for a sit down talk. Like even Kobe and Shaq had one, you know, after their problems, they were able to sit down and have that ESPN. I don't know if it's ESPN, but that one-on-one talk in which they were breaking down and came to a common place after that. It's all necessary, you know. What I'm curious about, and that me and my group chatted about after this battle was over, was if 50 and Ja will ever be in a place to sit down. And I'm not sure if that's even whether or not people are forgiving. I just think that with certain people, they take heed to the point where it's just like, hey, I can forgive someone, but it doesn't mean I have to be able to, you know, the outwardly public forgiveness that's happening. And I think that that's people that they're just not in that type of time, or at least on 50's end.
And I mean, that's real too. Like, no, it's also important to remember that none of these public figures owe us anything. You know, like they don't have to squash anything for our sake. They don't have to feel a certain way. They don't have to release a certain type of music. Like none of these public figures owe us anything. And
But it ends up being a fly on the wall in a way though for it, because all the shit started. I mean, when we were like what middle school and high school, so.
That's real.
Mm-hmm. I guess we can move on to the second topic real quick that I want to chop it up about. I got an email the other day that said my student loans, or my federal student loans, are they're gonna start charging again, and there hasn't been much relief or anything changing within what the government's doing or what they're providing for fun. So like this is gonna be these next 2 months are gonna be very, very interesting because now I feel like it's another time in which people aren't being proactive, you know. And I'm not talking about like the common people. I'm talking about the people in charge of making sure that we can like function on a day-to-day basis. You know, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be reactive. Once there is that change or transition of power, or if that's even dragged out even longer, I feel like we know what's to come and things are still not being taken care of on that end. And you and I talk about that a lot, being proactive versus being reactive, you know? And if this and if they know that the country is even still where it's at with cases rising and deaths are correlating to that and people still aren't back in office, it's like, guys, like help us like help out the generation that's gonna be in power in a few years, you know what I mean? To give us the best opportunity to make way and room for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we talked about this a lot, and not even just proactive and reactive, but I also feel like we talked about the notion that, like, you know, revolution or change or like a reset in America is long overdue, and America is extremely, extremely talented, for lack of a better word, at like prolonging it and pushing it off and kicking it down the line, but then also not doing anything to address it. You know, like life, it's already life or death circumstances for people who can't afford basic things that they need to survive, whether that's, you know, food, housing, healthcare. Um, so with that in mind, like they continue, the folks in power continue to not, to just be like, what's the bare minimum that we can do to make it seem like maybe we're helping and changing this shit, but we're not actually doing anything.
It's like they'd rather just talk about it instead of be about it. And it's like, just add another extension, or it's just like, why was this the given date back in the summer? You know what I mean? Did they all of a sudden think that things would just be fixed or handled, or is it just like, hey guys, this is the opportunity that we're giving you to just figure it out and then get it back together without help from us? You know, it gets frustrating. It really does, because it just seems like it's a complete disregard in where we need to be as a country. And I know Biden and Harris said that they're gonna cancel student loans, but like, or some form of those federal loans. But I don't know. As every day and every week that goes by, even by this administration not doing anything, or if the Senate or Congress can't pass anything as it pertains to this, it's like, what is actually going to change in a few months with loans? You know.
I mean, it's not disregard; it's straight up exploitation, bro. Like shit is based. It's like the folks who are making the decision feel that the only way that they can be in the power to continue to make those decisions is by making decisions like this. You know, they're not worried. Like it's not disregard. I mean, it is disregard in the sense that like they just don't care, but it's also like past disregard because it's not like inaction. It's inaction is an action. You know, like they're making the conscious choice. They know that in doing these things, what the repercussions of those actions are going to be. You know what I'm saying? We have, I mean, this whole pandemic has just shown us that. Like, it's just shown us. I think actually this is, you know, next week's or this upcoming episode of View Free, we talk a little bit about this with our guest. Stay tuned to find out who that is. But yeah, like we talk a little bit about this idea that, you know, everyone can see the jig. Like we all know, like everyone. Like student loans being a great example. Like student loans impact so many people, and we also are able to see where money is going. You know, the fact that like we know how big the military budget is, et cetera, et cetera. So we know that it's bullshit that they can't allocate money for these things. But at the same time, it's just the way that things are, and like the people who are affected by it aren't in position a lot of times to have their voices actually heard or to like actually push for that change. And so they have to constantly deal with the repercussions, even while knowing, you know what I'm saying? Like this, ignorance is bliss in some senses, in the sense that like, if we really felt like, oh, well, they're doing the best that they can. Yeah. At least we have that to fall back on, but we know they're not doing the best that they can.
That's like that psychological warfare that's happening too. Yeah, it's like, wow,
exactly, bro.
Really don't care. And I mean, and that's what I'm saying. It's like it's multi-layered too, because you mentioned the fact that there's already people who couldn't pay for their food, couldn't pay for their housing. Now those people who are able to take care of those too, what if like their breaking point was now student loans or somewhat of this debt cycle start rolling back in, you know? So it's like it's hitting many just different parts of the country and the population just at different times.
I mean, yeah. That's why we're
Sick.
overdue. That's why we're overdue for a revolution. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Like,
It also may be one of the situations where if no one pays it, no one can technically get in trouble, or maybe I don't really know the way it goes. But if you have some people who are starting to be able to make some of these payments, and a lot of the country can't, it's like, what are they going to do with that information? You know, because no one pays, it's like they have to adjust.
If some people can pay, then everyone should be paying. That's how they're looking at it. You know,
that's fact.
Because they just don't care. There's a Dom Kennedy song that came out recently, and he's like, how did people cut their lights out knowing that there's 4 people staying here tonight? Because they don't give a fuck, so I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? It's like they just don't, you know? Like,
they just don't at all.
So, yeah. And I mean, that's where, like, you know, a few weeks back, post-election, like, we were talking about this notion of, you know, like, progress and okay, you know, Trump's out of office now or potentially going to be out of office in January, et cetera, et cetera. And, like, you know, people took to the streets to celebrate and say, fuck him and, like, all this stuff. But it's like, okay, like, yeah, like, to your point, when the dust settles, what's actually been solved? You know, like, what actually, how, and promises have been made, you know, so we'll see how those promises, if those promises are kept. But at the same time, like, even in the interim period, like, people are suffering. Like, people
that's the scary part, because we don't know how long this interim period is going to last too, you know?
Yeah, status quo in America is people suffering, bro. Like,
yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
Even I saw a tweet the other day about, like, homelessness and how, like, ingrained we are to just accept that homelessness is a thing, you know? Like, and I mean, I'm currently out in the state that I'm currently in. I keep it vague these days. The state that I'm currently in has a high homeless population, and, you know, you walk around and you see it, and it is sort of like just accepted as, like, a thing, you know? Like, I think that's one of the most effective tactics that America has used against it, like, that the people in power have used against the everyday people, is this conditioning that, like, the conditions that they've made are like normal, like that the status quo that we operate in are normal. So you can walk down the street and see homeless people and just be like, oh, it's homeless people. Like, of course it's homeless people, because homeless people are just a thing, as opposed to, like,
that's the thing. Yeah.
Exactly, bro. So I don't know.
I know we can always go off this, but what I am hopeful for is I'm gonna give the elects just a clean slate. You know what I mean? So I feel like if I'm always preaching about improving and learning from my past, it's like I got to give them the same benefit of the doubt. Well, you know, and we don't lose nothing by being hopeful. I mean, we can still hold people accountable, but we don't lose by being hopeful. And I think that's gonna at least give me that sense of peace.
I feel that too. I mean, but where I also worry about that too is I also feel like, even in terms of this whole, like, bare minimum thing, it's like,
yeah.
there's issues which affect us, as in, like, me and you and, like, our peer group. There's issues which affect other Americans, but there's also issues which affect people outside of America. And I worry sometimes about how the way that treatment of Americans going up, people no longer caring about what America means, like, or what imperialism means on a global scale, because they're like, oh, I don't have to worry about student loans anymore. America's lit. But it's like, well, America, like, just because America's lit when you're in it doesn't mean that the impacts of what America is doing don't also have international impact that are, you know. So that's where it gets really complicated for me. Is like, I agree that we should have hope and optimism for people making changes, but I also think that we have to do so in a way that isn't setting ourselves up to just be like,
to just accept whatever.
To accept the bare minimum, as again, like, America's thing is like, let's just, and I mean, that's what just happened, you know, like, when the democratic process started, you know what I'm saying, like, you told me that our friends were going to be outside partying because Biden and Kamala Harris got elected. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the bar just kept lowering and lowering and lowering and lowering, and then you clear that bar, you're like, we finally cleared a bar. You know what I mean?
You gotta kind of push it back up as you start clearing things. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's real. Damn. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. All we can really do is wait. And I'm also curious to see these numbers that are gonna, because Black Friday is coming up this week, and I'm curious to see the way these retail numbers or what they end up producing. Because for some reason, this is always like big news in America. Like the holiday spender spent XYZ money on Black Friday, and it's like, all right, none of that money has been redistributed. I don't know. It's like what everyone's so excited about the fact that people are in the stores again. But I'm curious to see what that's about to say about where we are, our spending habits as a country. Because I assume morals changed these past few months. And I think this is going to be our first huge inclination of if it did or if it didn't, you know?
That's real. Yeah, we'll have to revisit next episode and see how it was looking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. We'll see.
You got any you have any Sunday shout outs?
Sunday shout-outs. Definitely, again, just, shout out to everyone who put together the service yesterday for Yeab. It was really beautiful. Yeah, that's one shout-out. I feel like I had another one, but I'm blanking, so you go, and I'll see if I remember.
Yeah, so no, similar shout-out to you, but I also want to shout-out Tavares as well. He just dropped some merch this past Friday. Definitely go check that out. Studio Populi. Hit him up on Instagram at Visiopop, VISIOPOP on the gram to find out more about that merch. It's fire too because they also have the song that meshed in well with the merch from the song that Tavares and Mari did. So
that was a fire piece. That's a good shout out. I still don't remember my other shout out, but
That's all good. Yeah. I thought it was gonna be a little simple one. That's why I was like, all right, let me throw that one in. That could be the one that was on the mind.
Yes, shout out to everyone doing their thing.
Everyone doing it.
That's the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah. And again, guys, thank you so much. We're going to be releasing another Call Us When You Free, a You Free podcast episode this Wednesday. Did you mention the guests?
I was keeping it mysterious. If you want to let it loose for the folks who are still tuned in, feel free.
No, they'll find out. They'll find out when we drop some info tomorrow on the Instagram at Call Us When You Free. And yeah, no, thank you again, guys, for watching. Thank you again, guys, for participating. This is fun. I love doing this, to be honest. Really just reflect back on the week, because I think that over time what it's going to show is hopefully the news cycles and what's happening in the world is changing in a more positive direction. A lot of things that we do decide to readdress, it becomes more or continuously grows in a positive light.
Yeah, definitely. This is also a good way for me to keep track of time, because I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, damn, we're on session 5 and we'll be doing this weekly. Like, it's already been 5 weeks.
You know what I'm saying? Which is wild to think about. Especially because we're not even at episode 60 for the podcast. So yeah, it is interesting about how fast these weeks actually go and how fast time is flying. So it's also a good marker in the universe, and also too to reflect back on where we were 3 weeks ago, as it pertains to discussions on the election, because I think that was exactly 3 weeks ago. And election day was, or was that 4 weeks ago? I think it was 4 weeks ago, maybe, where election day was coming up on that Tuesday.
Yeah, that was 4 weeks ago.
And it's like, guys, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. But it's like, guys, look, we're here, we're safe, and I think that was something that we were also speaking about, that the sun will rise again. So no matter how hard things seem that they are, or how hard things are getting, like, we got this, guy, like, straight up. There's always some light at the end of the tunnel.
Indeed.
Feel me?
It's a good place to leave it. That's a good place to leave it for this week. Stay tuned this upcoming week for the new You Free episodes. See you next Sunday for the next You Think episode. I usually end this with my hat. I gotta do that while exiting out. So
All right, peace and blessings, guys.